Welcome to everyone to the second half of the local area council this month, which we had to split into two halves. Of course, planning last Thursday, and now we have the, shall we say, the business proper today. And I welcome everyone here, including members of the public and the leader of the council, who's going to give a presentation soon, and we have officers as well. So we'll get rolling, and we've already had the minutes of the last meeting approved, so we don't need to go through that, but I do need to know any apologies for absence, please. Rebecca.
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Bridget, Councillor Thorne and Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors' apologies from the floor that we know of?
Councillor Patterson.
Oh, she did say it to me, quite right. Councillor Patterson, well reminded, thank you. Any disclosures of members' interests, please? Nobody's got a pet badger. Public, that'll be best. Public question time. Are there any questions from the public? There aren't. You can proceed well here. We're now on to petitions, which is item 4. And we have members of the public here, and the petitions, let me get the number. The petition page you need to turn to for this particular petition is page 125 of your thick agenda, please. And I think we've got to consider. Oh, I should ask first, are there any new petitions?
There's no new petitions, Chair.
Thank you. Now, these are reports on petitions previously received, housing delivery for permanent residents. And we have public speaker. Could you identify yourself, madam, please?
Chair, yes, my name's Rachel Douglas.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Now, Rachel, you can speak, and you have, I'm afraid, a strictly timed 5 minutes.
Not a problem, thank you, Chair.
To address the committee. So, can I ask you to begin now?
Chair and members of the Council, our petition asks you to commit to immediate action to help the residents and businesses on the Northumberland coast to ensure our community thrives, families have somewhere to live, and in turn businesses have the chance to expand and enhance the area by accessing staff. 12 years ago, I purchased a shared ownership property on the last scheme that was available in Sea Houses. I've subsequently sold this and moved up the ladder. Amy here with me today isn't so lucky. She's in a carbon home in Beadnell. This was the last social housing scheme launched in Beadnell over 10 years ago. Due to protected rights, Amy's not eligible to purchase her home, and then having had more children, her and her husband have outgrown this. She cannot afford to buy in the village due to the increasingly escalating house prices, and there are only 2 4-bedroom houses in Beadnell, Northumberland and Bamborough area that are for social rent. She faces the prospect of moving away from her home, her family and her husband's jobs. The schemes I have just mentioned were the last meaningful social housing schemes which were built in our area more than 10 years ago, over a decade, with no substantial investment in new houses in an area where the house prices have increased exponentially. A typical 2-bedroom house on a residential estate has increased by more than £100,000 in 4 years. Tourism has boomed and families have been forced to move away. Census figures for the last 5 census reports, not including 2021, show house numbers in Beadnell have more than doubled from 350 to 701, where the population has decreased from 1,108 to 546. In this time, the village has lost a shop, garage, fish and chip takeaway, a school, a pub, along with a hotel and an outward bound base. The soul is slowly disappearing from our area as it fails to be a sustainable community. We all know that Beadnell and Sea Houses are stunning villages. We can see why people flock to the area to relax, rejuvenate and holiday. The council have, quite frankly, done a tremendous job at increasing our tourist offering and promoting the area. However, at what expense? Holiday lets need cleaners, tourists want to go on boat trips, visit a cafe, have a pamper session, eat out. All these activities require staff and their seasonal jobs. Staff have become accustomed to making money while the sun shines, saving through the summer to see them through the winter, diversifying businesses. However, our average wages are still lower long term, and as a result of the seasonal variances. Your average family simply cannot afford to pay in excess of $300,000 on a 3-bed semi, which still needs investment to make it modern or inhabitable. Private rental properties are either being converted into holiday lets or sold for inflated sums as landlords cash in on the property boom, leaving the area in a dire state of affairs. Well, yes, we've got jobs, but there isn't the people there now to staff them. That's the background and the struggles our villagers face. What can you as a council do? There are pockets of land which are prime for investment, disused and dilapidated garages, an old first school and associated land which has been set aside for cemeteries which is no longer required, land where garages used to be. All these are already owned by the council. We need meaningful investment in affordable and social housing alongside the council manifesto, the Conservative manifesto. We need you, our local authority, to use powers of compulsory purchase to acquire agricultural land for housing. We appreciate the recent government closure on the tax loophole, but we need you to lobby further. We need the ability to charge second home owners up to 200% council tax, which then can be ring-fenced to support communities by building affordable homes. This is possible. It's happening in Wales, and we believe Scotland are following suit. You can lobby government for the regulation of holiday lets, just like the Scottish Government did last week. We need you to take action, meaningful action, now, not in 2023 and beyond, but now in 2022, before it's too late and before we lose more businesses and more hard-working families. Thank you, Chair.
That's very well done, thank you, considering you had to tailor it a little bit after my advice. Thank you, Rachel. I think we've got the next probably is Philip Soderquist, the Head of Housing. Is there anything you wish to add to the report that's in front of us, Philip, before I ask members to comment?
Probably just a couple of comments, if you don't mind, Chair. I think in terms of the submission that's been made, a lot of what you said is recognised, and I think it is a challenge in terms of, as you say, how you get that balance right between supporting and encouraging tourism, but also supporting and encouraging home ownership for local people. I think just to add on to a couple of comments, I think we do recognise there are a number of pressures and emerging pressures coming through, especially in coastal towns within Northumberland. So it is a difficult position for us. And I was saying to the Chair just beforehand, we have seen a significant shift away from affordable accommodation, rented accommodation, to holiday let. So, do understand the concerns that you've got. And I think recently they've talked about a 2,000% increase in holiday lets. So some of this, I think, is within the gift of the county council. Some of it is within the gift of the current owners and the actual current community to try and actually sort of redress some of this. So I think a lot of what we look at within the report is very much a statement of the current position. So the current position, I suppose, is what it is in terms of where we are. What we are trying to do in terms of the county council is, yes, try to address some of those years of challenge. So planning policy is changing. That will hopefully give us an ability as a local authority to look at housing being sold where it must be retained in home ownership in perpetuity, so it won't go to home ownership. Council is currently going through its budget process, and I don't want to steal anything from the leader of council, but we are actively looking at potentially £48 million of expenditure in terms of actually supporting the delivery of affordable housing. We are strongly working with colleagues in other housing providers and social housing providers such as Benicia and Carbon to actually encourage them to develop within Northumberland. So I think in terms of what you have said, I think a lot of it is recognised, if not all of it is recognised. I think the challenge is turning back probably many, many years of homes going from that home ownership model into either second homes or otherwise. And it's going to be, I think, a long challenge for us, but I think one that's been recognised with the way policy has been developed and emerging now within the local plan, and to say that of the commitment of the council to actually invest in affordable housing delivery as well.
Thank you, Philip. Do any members wish to chair? I'll turn first of all to the local member, Councillor Guy Rana-Thompson. Guy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure Rachel is preaching to the choir with the people in this room. This is an issue that we've been aware of. It's an issue that I've been telling everyone who would listen to me since I got elected in 2017. We are trying to do things. We've got the first school site in Sea Houses on the cards. They're going through the legal wrangling on that now. We've got 20 homes in North Sunderland being followed through by Bernicia. I've had meetings with Bamburgh Castle Estates and Northumberland Estates to talk through it with them, and they're all amenable. What the concept that I'm interested in exploring is the compulsory purchase. It's not something that we've explored before. It legally, is that something that can be done? Do we have the powers to compulsory purchase to build social housing in the way that we can with roads, schools and so on?
Thank you. Can you help with that answer, Philip?
The simple answer to the question is yes, the County Council has powers of compulsory purchase. Whether or not you would be successful is the question, isn't it? Because the process of compulsory purchase is actually quite challenging, quite laborious. And in the early stages, whilst it's quite simple and straightforward in terms of the County Council having developed its plans, etc., go through compulsory purchase, it's like all of these legal processes, where that process is then challenged, you then have to be able to evidence and demonstrate that there are actual grounds for compulsory purchase. So in answer to your question, is it a power that's available to us? Yes. Is it something that will be successful? I simply couldn't say, because you'd have to look at that on a scheme-by-scheme basis.
Yes, as I recall, it's also, if the offer is not accepted, it can end up with the Lands Tribunal, and it can be a very lengthy process indeed.
On top of that, I think we should support the calls to write to the government lobbying to have increased powers for council tax on second homes and holiday lets, like the devolved administrations have done. There's no reason we don't have the power to do that, but I think we should be writing to the government asking for it. I mean, this is an issue that we've been talking about for a long time, and it does seem to be gaining national prominence now. You've seen Cumbria, Cornwall, the Lake District. Everyone's on about it now, rather than before it was just a few select small places.
Okay, thank you. That's noted. Yeah, Councillor Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and it's obviously not just Beadnell, but it's across Northumberland. It's certainly the case in Berwick, and I've gone on to fill for years, and I'm sure others, about just a shortage of social housing, particularly the 3+ bedroom. And the fact is that house prices are going up, tourism's going up. People are actually saying we're a bit like what Cornwall was maybe 20, 30 years ago, but we've got an opportunity to prevent the worst things where it's almost like ghost towns during the winter. Just the question I was asking, is there anything in the neighbourhood plan that is designed to help?
They're almost two separate things, Georgie. So what the neighbourhood plan and what the new local plan, county council local plan, will do is restrict any new build housing to permanent occupancy only. So they can't be holiday lets. So the theory was that they would be a lower price because you couldn't just buy them and rent them out for £1,000 a week. However, since house prices in general have risen so much, that's almost not been the case. So even with the principal occupancy restriction, homes are still going well above what they would have been 5 years ago. So we can do that with the planning system. We can restrict it in that way. But what we've not been able to do is actually bring forward new council house estates. That's the second
you need
part.
to lobby the government, because the government is very, very weak in the face of the lobbying from the property and the housing sector. We all know that, so they need to toughen up, and you guys need to lobby them. Well,
we have the leader of the council. I know Glenn, in my extreme periphery, has got his hand up. Would you like to speak, Glenn? The floor is yours.
I don't want to say too much, because I think a lot of what needed to be said has been said, but I do need to make it quite clear that the budget next week will show a significant capital investment in affordable housing. Now, Phil Soderquist has not given you, because we don't have time, a full rundown of all the work he and his staff have done over the last 2 years. But it is much more than many of us would realise. So there's a lot of work that's been going on this, and there is a lot of work over the next 2 to 3 years. Additional to that, there is a significant amount of money that we have ring-fenced for affordable housing, for rent, for sale, for other use, and working with partners and housing providers. I can't give you any more details of that because we haven't launched the budget yet, but we will be doing that at the end of this week and the beginning of next. But I can give you the commitment that affordable housing is one of the key priorities for this administration, and we have found the money to put against a significant programme over the next 2 to 3 years.
Thank you, Glenn. Councillor Hunter.
Yes, Chair. I think it's a case of you've got affordable rent, but also affordable to buy. But if we do have it, say, come through planning that they're affordable to buy, how can we actually, or can we, keep them as affordable, or do they then get into the market and then come off cheap the first time to somebody, but then they go to market prices?
Well, I'm sure Philip will answer. We have a localism aspect to the policy, don't we? But Philip.
So I think it's the point that Councillor Thomas was making before. So local plan and some of the neighbourhood plans actually do make provision now whereby new homes which are being built in perpetuity for owner occupation, and that will be an ongoing requirement. The challenge would always be the county council can't control house prices. So when we talk about, and the county council's had a very successful approach through planning of discount market value housing. So I think when you talk about affordable housing, you have to have a suite of options. It's everything from, and this lady referred to, it's everything from whether it's for rent, whether it's shared ownership, whether it's discount market value. Because ideally what you want to do is be able to support people move through that process into home ownership. So we have been quite successful with discount market value within the planning system. Government introduced last year what was referred to as first homes. So first homes was a new tenure introduced. And that was about local housing for local people, etc., etc. And they are supposed to be allocated out, and again in perpetuity, 30% of market value. That's where it gets challenging, because you then say, well, what is market value, what's affordable? So affordable tends to be where you are spending about 25–30% of your household income on housing costs. But if we have a market, such as the coastal towns, whereby there is great interest in them for all the obvious reasons that you would get, market value will increase. Even though it's a reduced market value, it potentially is still going to be a high market value, because then you get into the, I suppose you get into the challenges or subtleties of what is income. So again, what you probably find in parts of Northumberland is that, you know, the average sort of income levels or ratio, some parts of the country is probably about 7.8, you know, in terms of the sort of affordable ratio. Parts of Northumberland, it's 10. In terms of that's how much household income they need to the house value. And that comes back to the point that's made, that we have a lot of seasonal work, a lot of lower paid work, etc., etc. So you could argue it's a perfect storm, because the county council, and as Councillor Sanderson said, is, you know, seeking as a priority, is intending to invest in it, and we can do so much. We can do so much, but we rely upon the market to do things as well, whether it's through the planning system or otherwise. But certain things we can affect, certain things we can influence, but history we can't influence. House prices we can't influence, and also some of the issues around sort of, you know, salary and wages we can't influence. So it is, I think, yes, the more affordable housing you provide, the more that's within the gift of affordable housing providers, where we are talking about either a social housing rent or an affordable housing rent, then the more control we can exercise, which is why our ambition, again referred to by Councillor Sanderson, is not necessarily to do this in isolation as a county council. It is to work with our partners, whether that's Carbon, Benicia, Riverside, Home, and actually get them to step into the market as well and assist. And there is an ability to do that now, because there is still funding available through certain Homes England programmes at the moment, and they are funded to do that. So some of this will be by us and some will be by partners, but it's a challenge. I can't, you know, you wouldn't be sitting here today if it was an easy thing to solve. It is a challenge, and it will take several years to get to a point, I think, whereby we are confident about, you know, the long-term security of some of our coastal towns and villages.
Thank you, and thank you, Philip. I think, certainly knowing from my experience, when the AONB did a check of the coastal village populations, it was less than 18% were residents in Beadnell, which is a shockingly low figure. And I'm not sure that it's got any better. I think Alnmouth was the highest, which was about 50%, as I recall, which was unusually high. So we absolutely recognise the problem, but saying that just sounds like comforting words. I hope you've heard enough to recognise from the officers, from the leader and from local members that we want to do whatever is within the power of the council reasonably to get things done, because the petitions, you know, it is an important aspect of life in Northumberland for those affected, and people absolutely recognise this. I'm grateful for you. Did your hand go up? I wondered if I thought you were just. I will, before I end it, then I will allow Councillor Seymour to speak. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, also I'd like to thank the Speaker very much for coming here today to the committee to highlight this issue. It is a key priority for this council, and I'm very supportive for more affordable housing in all areas of the county. So thank you for coming today.
You have support. I hope you're satisfied, at least with that, and to know that this is not a put it on the shelf and worry about it in the future. We do intend to do what we possibly can within our powers. Thank you very much for coming, and you may leave as and when you wish. You don't have to sit through the rest of it. Thank you. Now, from Hoosiers to Badgers, we have another petition, and I believe you've got something to add to it, so I think I'll ask you to come up with this, Gavin. Greg, Gavin.
That's
Greg,
okay. Thanks, Chair. So, Chair, would you like me to present the report and a verbal update, or just a verbal update? Because everybody's seen the report.
We've all seen the report. Would you wish Greg to go through it again, or are you content with the update? Go through the update.
Okay. So, just in terms of context for the petition, we do have badgers on site in Tweedmouth Cemetery in Berwick, and the petition that has been raised is asking the council to protect loved ones, remove badgers safely, and place deterrents around the perimeter to prevent more devastation. And just contextually, what is happening, I'm sure most people are aware, is badgers are coming out to forage for food, and they are damaging the surface of the new section of the cemetery in particular, which is understandably very, very upsetting for visitors to the cemetery, and leading to wider concerns around what may be going on at a subterranean level underneath the ground. So people have got the upset of what they can see is being done, but they've also got the fear that below ground potentially their loved ones' remains are being disturbed as well. So the neighbourhood services team has spoken to petitioners and to other visitors to the cemetery, and done quite a lot to try and mitigate that. But the one thing that the petition calls for is for us to apply for a licence, as the report outlines, to Natural England to move the set and to move the badgers. Now, in terms of a verbal update, the petition report does state that we are in the process of completing an application for a licence to relocate the badgers, which is what the petition had asked for, and that we will submit an application in January 22, which is now. Now, on Friday, we received our draft report from our named ecologist that we'd appointed to do a badger survey, and they ended up doing quite an extended badger survey to try and support our application. But the verbal update that I've got today is that draft report from our named ecologist, which we received on Friday the 21st of January, actually recommends that the County Council do not apply for a licence to relocate the badgers. So in terms of the impact that has on the report in front of you, the first part of the third recommendation, recommendation C, is to note that we're in the process of completing an application and that we will submit it. We're now proposing not to submit an application, to take another course of action, which I'll outline in this verbal update. So the named ecologist does not think that a licence will be possible to obtain from Natural England, given the current state of the site, the location of the sets and the level of activity. And that does reflect the informal advice given to us by Natural England when we began dialogue back in the summer with them. They also do not think that a licence, and this is the critical bit for me, they don't think that a licence to move the set would actually resolve the issues that we're experiencing in terms of damage to graves and the surface. So their advice is, though a badger licence would allow us to move and shut down specific sets that are there presently, it would not allow us to close off any future sets, and would simply encourage badgers to create alternative sets in the immediate area, which provides them with really rich habitat, and the issue of damage to graves won't be resolved. So we could achieve our stated objective of applying for a licence, but even if we were granted one, the specialists are telling us that it wouldn't be effective, and they're proposing a different course of action. So given that, in addition to some of the measures that we've already taken, and we've already applied sort of nematodes, which are a natural way of trying to tackle the grubs and the other food sources that the badgers feed on. We've tried an application of that. We are trying like a pheromone trap, not for the badgers but for the bugs, to try and trap some of the food sources, and we've done and are planning to do more things around vegetation management to try and prevent the badgers from coming on site. The advice is that in addition to all of those things, that we really need to consider erecting badger-proof fencing between where the sets are and where the new section of the cemetery is, where all the damage, or where the majority of the damage is taking place. So that fence should be erected along the top of the steep embankment between there and where the graves are being damaged. It would need to be dug in the ground to ensure its success, because badgers obviously by their very nature tunnel, and would need to be done under very specific working methods. There's a science behind it apparently. So when that was an original suggestion from Natural England, it was one of a few that we discounted and didn't think was appropriate. Another one was electric fencing, we didn't think was appropriate in that setting. And another one was we should let the grass grow long because it's shortly maintained, well-mown grass that they're attracted to, and we didn't think that was appropriate either. But having discussed it now with the named ecologist, we are confident that the correct design option can mitigate the visual impact of that fencing within the cemetery, potentially along with some complementary planting. So officers in my team are meeting specialists on site later this week to develop a specification for that fencing against which quick quotations can be sought. Now, due to the proximity of that work, a licence may still be required, but not to move the badgers, to put the fence in place. So we're speaking to Natural England today to ask them whether or not we need to submit a licence for that. And if we do, we'll do that, you know, really, really quickly before the end of the month. So that is a change to what was in the report, but a further draft report has been received. I think the report states that we have engaged a ground penetrating radar survey specifically to investigate those concerns that residents had that their loved ones' remains were being disturbed at a subterranean level, and that badgers were interfering with graves underground. And I'm very pleased to report to the committee that the experts undertaking that subsurface investigation have concluded that badgers were not tunnelling in the area surveyed, which hopefully will provide some comfort and reassurance to residents who have got loved ones buried in that section of the cemetery. So that is a last-minute change to the report, but I only had the information on Friday, Chair. So.
Thank you. I do appreciate you bringing us up to date with that. Which is a very sensitive subject, obviously. We don't have the lead petitioner here today, but we do have the local members, so I will raise it with local members. Do you wish, or members indeed, do you wish to raise anything? Councillor Hunter, then Councillor Hill.
Yes, as the ward councillor for the cemetery, I'd like to thank first of all Greg and Bob and the team for the work they've put in since the summer, and especially Bob's team going in daily, even at the weekends, and checking. I think the petition was that they wanted to move the badgers to a nice place for the badgers. I think that's it. The cemetery they felt wasn't the appropriate place. So I think it's just getting that across. That, you know, they didn't want any damage to the badgers. But again, it's looking at it as, you know, we all, can I say, bury members of the family when at certain points. And it's a case of it's respect for that. Because I've been on site as well and seen some of them, and it wasn't just scratching on the surface. There's one or two that has been. And so far, in the last few weeks, we haven't had, I don't think Councillor Hill Knight's had any sort of great complaints that we was having. But I think, to me, if we're getting advice that they're going to be successful in an application, we're going to need that evidence, because that was what was said in the summer. We needed the evidence to be successful. And a case of if they're recommending a fencing, I think we need to go down their recommendations. And if it doesn't work, as long as the neighbourhood service team are quite happy to continue checking regularly and try to give the support to families. It's supporting the badgers as well as supporting families. It's a two-edged sword, and I think we just need to go forward and try to do that, but still keep on the back burner that if this doesn't work, we look at alternatives, because it has to work. Because some of the people have looked on the websites and that, and they have seen, which if you're going to see on websites, you see the bad stories, and I think it's that fear that we end up like a war zone with sunken graves and that. But it's nice to hear that it sounds as if they're not tunneling underneath. But again, I think it's supporting what you're going to do, but make sure the door is still open. If this doesn't work, that we'll look for some alternatives.
Thank you, Isabel. That's clear. Will you be taking back this response to petitioners yourself as local member?
I will do.
Thank you. Got that. Councillor Hill.
Thank you. I am really concerned about this because there was an assurance given to residents that we'd apply for a licence, and we were told that Natural England were advising us not to. And Natural England, who, they get £180 million of taxpayers' money every year, and it seemed to me that they were wanting to tread a careful path to not upset any animal rights activists, but not have the blame. So they were quite happy for residents just to have a go at the council about this. And I know the leader agreed at the time as well, that we should apply for the licence. So we apply, so we're doing everything we can. And if we fail, then maybe in 6 months' time, the circumstances that would mean that we would get the licence. It doesn't wash for me to say it won't work because they might come back. Well, maybe you need to get future licences. But I do think that we need to apply. I'd be interested to know more. It's always just scrutinising and testing when you're getting, an expert opinion on something. It's not some sort of objective standard. I mean, we all know in planning, when they sit and there's a concern about noise, for example, and they say, oh, the consultant's done a noise survey and they said the noise is going to be fine. And you're like, well, who's paid and who's employed the noise consultant? Oh, the developer. And it's that sort of same thing. So, who is this named ecologist? I don't get the logic of saying it won't work because they might come back, which is always the risk. And I think residents will be concerned about this. And therefore, I think that we should, as we promised, I think we should progress with the licence. And Natural England really need to up the game because they just seem to be sitting back. And a fence, I'm no expert on these things, but these things are very strong. They dig way underground, and it's going to be the world's deepest fence. I just don't get that. In my view, in my opinion, I would pursue the licence to deal with this issue, because just my final point, what is upsetting, whether there's some technicality, whether they're actually going tunnelling under coffins, or what exactly is happening. What I do know is when you go to that cemetery, which is really upsetting, pretty much every plot now, when there's been a recent burial, and if they've been buried in the rain, it takes a while for the grass to even up and the stuff. So you see the recently dug graves. But if you go to the cemetery now, all the evidence of being resurfaced, and it is really upsetting for residents. So we need to do everything we can. And if we fail, we try again. We understand the parameters. But my view, I'm not voting, and my view would be to pursue the licence.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Another, the leader wishes to speak.
Yeah, I would like to come in if I may. I had a discussion about this with Paul Jones on Friday when he advised me of the advice that we'd received from the consultant that was working with us. I said to him that I would like him to contact Natural England and get something ideally in writing from them to say that, having reviewed what the consultant has said, they can guarantee me that they would guarantee that any application would fail. Otherwise, we press ahead, because that's what we said we would do. Now, I think Paul's been very busy today, and he hasn't been able to get through to Natural England. So Greg and others have very sensibly come forward with this report as it is at the moment. My own view is that if members feel, actually as I do, which is that we just need to pause for a little while, get a response from Natural England before we definitely say we're withdrawing the application. That's what I said to Paul on Friday. And personally, I prefer that to happen.
Thank you. Yeah, Isabel, yes.
As the ward member, I'd happy to support the leader's recommendation to move forward. Thank you,
Right.
Leader.
Well, petitions are a curious thing, aren't they? They're not quite a debate and they're not a decision-making function here, but your comments are noted, and I think the leader will take that on board. Thank you. Sorry, I keep missing you, Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm very concerned about this. It's been very upsetting for the residents, and all the local councillors in Berwick have been concerned. And indeed, the leader even came, Glenn Sanderson, to meet with the residents, with officers to discuss. So, yes, I agree that we should press ahead with this.
Thank you.
And try to resolve this matter.
Thank you, Catherine. Any final comments, Greg?
Just thank everybody for their contribution, and we'll obviously follow the guidance that we're given and plan for both that licence being accepted and being rejected. So we'll plan for both.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very clear. Thank you. We'll move on now. You don't have to stay, Greg. I don't think there's anything else on point, but you may do it.
I'll stay for the local services bit and just...
Yes, that's a good idea. Which is next, isn't it? So, I'll put my glasses on, find out where I was. Now we're on to local services, where we have an update from the area managers of principally the highways and the local services side. And normally I'm inviting Graham Bucknell.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman. I've got a meeting at 2 o'clock, which I have to go to. So as long as you can fit me in, I take about 10 minutes. But
Did I say, I think I might have even said, Glenn, in the past when I split this, that I could, if you'd asked me, raise you up the agenda. Did you say you did? Or I can't remember. Right, in that case, would you excuse me? Is that all right, members? I'll take the blame for that. I do recall Glenn saying he would like to have gone on earlier. So, Glenn, the floor is yours, and I apologise for the last second change in the agenda.
thank you very much. I really will be quite quick. But,
That's all right.
I'll do the best I can to give you a very quick rundown of the state of the county and where we are with that. It won't include details of the budget, other than I want to say straight away that this is the final LAC meeting that we've been to. We've also done an online consultation again this year, because I thought it worked well last year for the first time. So we've done that again this year, and we've had over 300 responses, which we're also looking at. And I want to say thank you for allowing me to come to your LAC meeting to do this today. So if I may just begin with what might look like a rather strange slide to begin with, but this is actually the essence of one of the key parts of our budget, which is around COVID. Now, this is from the 1st of January, and I'm glad that staff are still here, because I want to make one thing abundantly clear right at the start. There will be no cuts to frontline services. And the reason for that is because I think Northumberland, and I'm sure any of you who travel around the country will agree, Northumberland looks very clean, it looks very tidy, it looks well kept, and it looks loved. And that's down, by and large, to our staff. In addition, during the COVID time, and that's one snapshot of what we've been through, during the COVID time, our staff turned out and delivered those frontline services across our services in the council, and I'm hugely grateful to them. I know I've said that before, but I want to demonstrate that this year by saying there will be no cuts in frontline services. And that is really a commitment to doing the best we can, even though we do have budgetary pressures, to see this next year with the service continuing as it is. The state of the county COVID inequalities is quite useful, because COVID has shown that this county, even though it may not have inequalities across it in terms of large numbers, it does have inequalities across it in pockets that are serious for those local communities and settlements. So one of the key aims, and forgive me, and I'll probably say this again, and I've said it before in council, we have two key priorities, this administration. One is to actively support new business, to support existing business, and to help those people who need our help the most, and to do something about inequalities. And what we saw was, during COVID, that those people with less money, with less against their name, those with the smallest budgets, have been hit hardest by COVID, and the outcomes have been tough on them. So I want to make sure that we make a real difference over the next few years of this administration to deal with that. So far as the county is concerned, this is a slightly out-of-date slide, but it does show that unemployment is falling and employment opportunities is rising. That has continued an upward trend in terms of employment opportunities, which is to be very welcomed. And we see that that as an example of the renaissance this county is going through, there is more opportunity now, but we still have lots to do. In terms of income, you can see that average weekly earnings have risen. They still need to rise more, but it is a good upward trend, and that is very, very welcome and encouraging. So our corporate plan will be delivered at around the same time as our budget. It says, and it means it, that we will listen to and communicate with residents and business and partners. Now, we have done that a lot more in the last couple of years, and I want to continue that. I would like to think that our relationship with parish and town councils has improved. I think there's a greater degree of trust and understanding of each other's difficulties and each other's opportunities and challenges. So it's really important to me that we continue, for example, the cabinet members attending parish and town councils on a regular basis, and good communication. So when I get written to, I always try and reply within 24 hours. And I think our officers do a very good job of that as well, by and large. And I think that's really important as well when it comes to dealing with our residents. So we want to get more and new investment, clearly. We want to live and learn. We want to ensure the best education standards. And generally, and I look to Guy, who's done a brilliant job as a cabinet member responsible, those are improving. We talked about affordable housing before. It's very true that we do need to do more, but we can only do that with partners and with the right tools, the right land, the right economic affordability and opportunity. And I did say before, and I'll say this again, that Phil Soderquist has done a fantastic job with his staff on affordable housing, and we have this extremely sizable budget that we have allocated towards affordable housing that will see some big difference in the year and years ahead. So the corporate plan, there it is: economic recovery, growth, investment, and tackling health inequalities. And on health inequalities, we will be taking our first major step with that on the 4th of March by holding the first ever Inequalities Summit. And that will bring all key partners together that are working across the county. They are all doing a fantastic job, but I think there needs to be more political oomph and clout put into this from us. And I think that's generally welcomed. And so we will do and play our part in reducing inequalities, whatever that looks like. And I think we all realise, with the threat of electricity prices rising soon, that fuel poverty in particular will become a really serious issue across the county that we need to understand, and we need to do what we can to help with. So the budget, the overall funding context, we've got more that we're spending on social care. We've got more services that we need to provide with an ageing population. I speak for myself. And we know that we older people cost more money. Therefore, but we don't mean to, but we do. It's a fact of life that we have to find more to look after older people. We know about the impact of COVID-19 on not just our own budgets, but also on national government. Now, we know that the spending review has come up with those figures. The provisional settlement that we had for this year is 1 year only, unfortunately, but we are working towards that. And then the council tax referendum limit is, as you see there. So we want to continue to invest in our future, to continue with our climate change action plan, which has done so much good work so far and is a real key priority for the council, to attracting investment. And I was lucky enough to be at the British Vote event last week, where we saw the result of over £1 billion of investment now in place. The factory will be starting to be seen to be building soon, and there will be jobs advertised that will start either the back end of this year or early next year for 2,000 to 3,000 new jobs in Northumberland. And it's not just important for those people, it's important because it will bring confidence to other investors to come to Northumberland. And we know actually now, just today, that there is another very well-known household company that are looking very closely at Northumberland. That's great, it really is. And if you have time to go down to Blyth and look at the Port of Blyth and see what's happening there, it is unbelievable, the transformation taking place. So if you do have time, please go and have a look. It's brilliant. And we want to see that spread out across to Berwick. We want to see Berwick thrive as well, and we're certainly investing heavily in Berwick, as we know. The Energising Blyth programme, huge amounts of money going to Blyth, and we're looking now to try and spread that across and bring forward a new bid for Ashington. We've got Borderlands investing heavily in our more rural areas, as well as towns across the county. The Northumberland line, started by the last but one administration, so I would be wrong not to acknowledge the work that they did. We're building on that work, and we're seeing real fruits coming to fruition now, if that's the expression. Is that an expression? Fruits coming to fruition? Probably not, I'm sorry. You know what I mean. And then extra care housing is very important to us for the reasons I mentioned before about the ageing population, the school bills in Berwick, Seaton Valley and the James Calvert Spence in Amble. Investing in our parks and open spaces. Our parks and open spaces have been hugely useful over the COVID 18 months. Hugely useful to give that opportunity for people to get closer to nature, to have peace and quiet, and to enjoy all those things that we have in our parks. So we want to look to invest and support more in our country parks, our parks and our open spaces. Similarly, public conveniences are very important to any place. It is absolutely wrong that older people or people with young children should turn up at a town in our county and not know where, by clear signage, where the public conveniences are. Or indeed, there may not be public conveniences. So we want to look at that. We want to make sure we don't have smelly, unpleasant public conveniences. We have ones that are fit for our county. And then finally, our roads, walkways and cycleways. We have an exciting investment programme in cycleways and walkways, and we hope to find a little bit more money for our roads if we can. So, spend and savings. We want to review our services. We're looking at a transformation programme, which, if it works correctly, which I think it will help us to deliver services in a different, more modern way that will save us money, but ensure that we continue to do the services we want them to. We want to, as you would expect us to, ensure the council has sufficient reserves. You'd expect us to maximise income generation and value for money in delivery of its priorities. And the next pie chart is about the proposed savings and efficiencies, and that gives that as an indication there. So, Mr. Chairman, can I conclude by saying thank you again for letting me come to your local area council. It is important that all members have a say in the budget process, and all residents have the opportunity to as well, and we've done that. We look forward to having the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in a week or two's time that will look at the budget in detail. And then the final version will be considered in a few weeks' time at full council on the 23rd of February. I hope that's been helpful, but more than happy to take any questions, not difficult ones, because I don't have Richard Wearmouth as my cabinet member responsible for this area, but I'll certainly do my best.
Very well, thank you, Glenn. That was a very brisk trot through the presentation aspects. And I will ask members, do you have any not too difficult questions? Councillor Hill, please make it not too difficult.
Okay. I have to say it is quite refreshing to hear what you've been talking about compared to the usual things that have been discussed in council meetings. It's good to get to the nitty-gritty. I say that, of course, we haven't had any details yet. It's some sort of broad brush, sort of headline and sound bites and so on, which is absolutely fine. I look forward to looking at it in detail. What I would just ask, and I do appreciate, and I think as an opposition member, you always have to appreciate it's very easy to say, spend more here, don't cut back here, but you know, you're the one having to put the budget together, and I think it's right and fair to respect that. Just on that note, and there's an inevitability about this, what are the, when it comes to the budget meeting and the usual, you know, points being made, and some people's jobs it is to scrutinise and maybe find fault, what in the budget are going to be the controversial points, which are going to be the things that people are going to pick up on? And specifically, I mean, the one area that we all immediately go to is the capital spend, what's for our area, and made the point numerous times over the last few years. Berwick has, as a simple evidential matter of point, for years there was very little there. Recent years it has gone up a lot. Just, you know, I'll say that is just a simple fact. And I do see other areas though now in what Berwick used to be a few years back and think you're not getting very much. So in terms of the controversial points, which areas do you think are going to jump up and down and say don't see much for us, and generally what are the points of weaknesses, the controversial areas?
Thank you very much indeed. Well, we're going to cut the funding for Berwick School by half.
It's going to Alnwick, isn't it? It's going to Alnwick, isn't it, Glenn?
It's all right. It's all right.
I was toying with that question because you originally wanted it half, if you remember, before my motion to get it up. So you're not going to cut it back, are you?
Only does it to annoy because he knows it teases. Don't worry.
You're joking, yes.
Well, you'll have to wait till next week. I think...
Good luck in the next election.
I think what I would say is Berwick has transformed as well. It needs a lot more, and I'm looking forward to having a discussion about the port soon. But Berwick has changed a lot. It's grown in confidence. It's grown in terms of its ability to say, this is Berwick, this is us, this is a good town to come and live and work in. And so I think you'd agree with me, the Berwick members, and I would thank the Berwick members for the work that they've done on that. You've got the culture zone coming next year, hugely important this year, later this year. That's going to be hugely important for the town. You've got the slight matter of a £25 million, I think it is, leisure centre about to open. That's not bad. And then you've got the potential of a brand new theatre, cinema, meeting place, a state-of-the-art facility that many places in Northumberland, indeed the world, would scream for. So Berwick has done really well, and I pay tribute to the members for their part in that across the piece. But I'm proud of what we've done in Berwick, and I'm very proud of the energy of people in Berwick. The Berwick Festival, for example, what a wonderful thing that is. And many of you are patrons. And that's wonderful. All voluntarily done. So that's great. So the question was, you'll have to wait till next week.
Thank you very much, Glenn. I suppose that this is the wrong time to remind you that there's this place between Berwick and Hexham called Alnwick, but we'll move on to the next questioner, Councillor Renner Thompson.
Of course, I have no questions because I've seen the budget in detail as a member of the Cabinet, but I would ask you to cast your minds back to before 2017, and what our residents said to us was the north of the county gets nothing. Labour runs the council, and therefore all the investment goes to their areas in Ashington and Blyth. And I'm very happy to say that we have reversed that. You know, and the residents do say that to you on the street. They see that the council is now investing in the north of the county in a way that it never ever used to.
Thank you, Gary. Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Hunter.
Yes, it's nice to see for the leaders saying that we're not getting front service cut, because I think that's the first thing that residents do see. You know, the grass doesn't get cut and the face-to-face, it's nice. And I think COVID has encouraged us all in the world to find different ways to work. So I think backroom services, there's a better way of working, and if we can find savings that way and not cutting the front line, I welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would just repeat what I said right at the beginning, Mr. Chairman, is that I'm hugely grateful to all the staff at all levels across the council for doing what they've done. I really am grateful to them.
Thank you. That is noted. I've got one further point, I think, from Councillor Seymour. I didn't miss you this time.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you very much, Leader, for presenting that. I would just say it's not easy to prepare a budget to try and, please everyone. You can't. It's impossible. But I think we've done a really good job, not cutting local services, which residents really bang on about. And also in the north of the county, we have been getting lots more, tons more than we ever did under any other administrations. So just say well done to the officers and everyone that had an input.
Thank you. That's noted. I think that's it. I think we can let you go, Glenn. Thank you very much indeed. And how's the knee?
So,
Aye, yes, you're making progress. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Right. We go back to the agenda as was. And if I can remember, oh yes, it's local services. And I think we can go back to you, Graham, and invite you to take the floor with a quick update on on highways, and followed by Bob. The floor is yours, and you can take questions.
Thank you, Gordon. So just a quick update on highways matters. So the surfacing gangs have now completed 29 out of the 31 major resurfacing schemes in the Northern Area programme for this financial year. 2 left, which are Swansfield Park Road footpaths, which I've spoken to you, Gordon, that may be delayed, and Sunnyside Scremerston is the only other one outstanding. Completed since the last area council a scheme at Forden Farm near Powburn, Station Road Embleton, and the A1 across to Leamington Bank Crossroads. Away from the LTP, we've also completed a major resurfacing repair at Dennick Lane, which has been ongoing for too long. Away from the surfacing side of things, the civils gangs continue to deliver a wide range of schemes from integrated transport programme, ranging from the minor things such as drop curbs for wheelchair access, 20-mile-per-hour zones at schools, safety signs and road markings, and all the way up to the major schemes such as the removal of the ford at Coalgate, Berwick Quay walls, which I believe is nearly finished now, and also the Berwick Leisure Centre roundabout, which I also believe is nearly finished. As always, we've got highways inspectors and the response gangs out dealing with the routine maintenance of potholes, blocked gullies, signs, etc. On top of the day-to-day maintenance routes, the 3 inspectors that we have are dealing with probably 100 to 200 complaints and reports every week, which is a real challenge for them. Winter services, very much in the limelight. Seems like we're having a reasonably mild winter this year, touch wood. But the gritters have still been out on many occasions, and the team are trying to keep on top of the hundreds of grit bins that we've got as well. So I think it's going pretty well, considering that we've lost a hell of a lot of officers to COVID over the last few weeks, and also we've had a lot of fallout from Storm Arwen to deal with. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Yes, questions on highways, please. First, where are we in terms of your COVID losses at present, Graham? Where do we stand in terms of your manpower?
It's getting better. We've had at one point we had about 12 staff self-isolate. In fact, it was more than that, 15 or 20.
15 I'd heard, yes.
Yeah.
But it's getting
It's
back
coming
to
down. Yeah, it's coming down.
Good, that's satisfactory. Thank you. Councillor Mather.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, I want to say thank you to all the staff. The response from the highways gangs, and Tony Bell was on call at the time of the storm, was fantastic. It was the one department really shone out very quickly of how they responded to that using the winter maintenance stuff. So I think that does need noted. When you're talking about the winter maintenance, I believe there's a huge problem with the new technology we've purchased with the gritter wagons, meant to be automated. They're not working, they're losing signal. Now, if we have purchased this equipment and it's not working, are we dealing with that within the company to get some funds back, or are we looking at changing? Or?
I would imagine they're talking to the suppliers to try and resolve that issue. I'll speak to Mick Call. Mick Call runs winter services.
I think it would be good to get an update on that, because
Is it
it
serious,
is a
Graham?
concern.
I mean, you say it is, Mark. I wasn't aware of this somehow. Is it been a big issue?
I'm not aware of that it's a big issue. I don't have a great deal to do with the winter services teams. I'm not on the front of the winter services.
Will you get you'll get an answer to Councillor Mayor,
will,
will you?
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the other point was the gully wagons. That we've had a report from Paul that we purchased the new gully wagons. I see we've still got an old one at Alnwick.
I'm told they've been spotted in Stakeford Depot.
So they are here.
They are, yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Hill.
Is Bob speaking as well?
No, yes, he will be next. I've decided to go through questions one.
I think it's highway related to.
Please go ahead.
It was just following on. It might cross over into Bob's team as well, but it was just following on to the point that I raised at the full council, and that was about access to sandbags. Was it the Friday or Saturday after the storm? About 2 in the morning, we had relentless rain, and North Road and part of East Ord and 1 or 2 other corners were really, really bad. And fortunately, it stopped raining. It felt just in time. It really did. It felt like, and they had to get sandbags from Amble. So you're just thinking almost as a sort of civil contingency point or so on, that it. You felt there should be a stock of sandbags a bit nearer to Amble. In Isabel's patch in East Ord, one of the places past you at 2 in the morning, the fire brigade were there sweeping water in, using grass to try to soak it up. They're desperate for sandbags, and I made a few calls and said they're coming from Amble. And as I say, it was so fortunate the rain stopped when it did. But moving forward, you think there should be a more accessible. I'm sure there's some, but like proper stock of sandbags nearer.
I'm surprised at that, Georgie. I thought there should be sandbags at Berwick, there should be sandbags at Alnwick, there should be sandbags everywhere.
Would you investigate that,
Yeah,
please,
certainly,
Graham, and provide an answer to Councillor Hill? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Brenner Thompson's next.
Thanks, Chair. You've answered my first question already, because I was going to ask about potholes. In the past, you would report it, and then maybe a day or two later they were filled, but there seems to be a bit of a gap now. But I'm guessing that's due to the lads being off with COVID.
Yes, yeah, we've suffered
Because there's some hellish potholes out there at the moment with the weather we've had. And my second question, I know I sent you an email about this just before the meeting, Graham, and I think it would be good for everyone to know. What is the crack with, after the storm, trees were felled along the side of the roads. In places there's still piles of brash and timber lying at the side of the road, but the trees themselves may be on someone else's land in the farmer's field or someone's garden. Whose responsibility is it then to clear that brush away from the side of the road? Because there's still quite a lot of it lying about.
Yeah, that's a good question, Guy. If they've come down from the highway verge, obviously it's our responsibility to get rid of them. If they've come down from private property, that's a different matter. That's a grey area. I mean, you'll know there's piles of wood all over the county. It's a massive task.
We're talking months, are we ahead, did you say?
Many months, probably 12 months.
Chair, can I make a comment on that?
You can.
It's just, we need to support the highways team in some way to try and get these tidied up, because verge mooring's going to be nigh on impossible in places due to the amount of timber. Is it worth the council producing a document that we can all share with landowners to explain their responsibility to the point that the guys raised? Do we need to educate landowners what their responsibilities are, or how the council could help them in doing that? Just so it's quite clear, because I didn't know until Guy asked that question. where does people stand? So
Yes, I mean, in terms of the process, Graham, do you think we could do better? I mean, this is completely unprecedented, naturally.
It is.
And I've read the emergency plan, and it doesn't go into specifics like that. So, do you think there's room for what Councillor Mather is suggesting?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about an extraordinary situation here.
Yes.
Nothing we've ever come across before. On a smaller scale, on a day-to-day scale, if there was a tree overhanging the highway from someone's property, we would write to that property owner and say, it's your responsibility to deal with that problem. And if you don't, we'll deal with it and charge you. So in this case, if trees have come down from private property, I suspect it's the same answer.
It's just, I think, is what you're saying really, that we need to advise the public that what was a one-off in the past, and perhaps an occasional incident, is so widespread that a degree of flexibility will have to be expected of the council, and from time to time things we'll do what we can, but it might not cover everything. Is that what you're telling us?
I guess so. I'll raise it at a higher level. I'll raise it with my
But
manager.
it is a fair question, isn't it? I mean,
It
you're
is,
quite right.
yeah.
We had a discussion with some colleagues who had a go at me about it not being cleared up, but the road was clear. I said, well, that was the main issue, was clear of the road. You can drive there. The fact that there's logs on the side of it, you know, that's much longer term. But it is an issue which I'm sure you are more than aware of.
Yeah, we are. And the clear up is still going on, and the clear up will probably still be going on this time next year.
It might be worth, yes, I think it probably would be worth a briefing on this specific aspect at the next local area council. I can't think of a different way of doing it. Would that be possible? Just
Yeah,
to let us know where we are.
Yeah, of course.
Is that all right, members? I'll ask her that. Thank you. Other questions? Was that it, Guy? Thank you. Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question's really on the flooding. I know we get a lot of leaves coming down and the drains get blocked. And in my area on the North Road, there is a particular problem there with a drain that needs to be replaced. I'm not sure where we are in that process, but it's been blocking up there for years, and there's been a regular flood there, not just this time, but many other times, which, it's the drains, not sandbags, really, we need there done. But I'm just wondering if whether these are cleared out more often, in the autumn when all the leaves are coming down, whether the drains are, because that is the issue. I have residents that I know that when they contact me, that you go and clear them, but, because they're blocked, individual ones, but I'm just wondering if in the autumn, if you do more drain clearages to
There's a
stop the
schedule,
flooding.
isn't there?
There's a route schedule, and there's also hotspots which we target, known hotspots. But we've got tens of thousands of gullies just across the north of the county, and we've got one gully tank and two if we hire one in. It's very difficult. I mean, we could clear one day, and the leaves may block it the next day.
Right, yes.
So
That drain on the North Road, do you know where we are in the process of getting that fixed?
Yeah, there's the North Road one. There's been a resurfacing scheme in the LTP for the last 3 years, and it's been put back because there's a drainage investigation supposedly being carried out by the flooding team.
That's right, and I understand that the whole pipe has to be replaced.
I believe
along
so.
there.
Yeah.
So the answer
Could you
is
look into that to see where we are with that?
Yeah, I'll ask.
okay.
I'll ask Aaron to get in touch
It's a
with
limited
you.
resource for a scheduled, it is scheduled, but if there's a particular issue, you can raise it. Sorry, I'm answering your question. Councillor Hardy, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to pass on my thanks to the officers for the work that they've done in my patch, especially the response to the box safety ladder on Holy Island Causeway going down. That was a concern that was raised through the lifeboat and the Coast Guard, and it's pleasing to see how quickly you got the scaffolding there. and the rescue box back into operation. Also, touching on the flooding, thank you for diverting a vehicle off the A698 down to Norham and clearing the flood, continual flood that we have there, and I look forward to seeing more investment at the bridge. Likewise, for getting the officers out this week to look at the flooding issues that we have at Horncliffe and the work that's about to happen with the new path and Bob's team cleaning it up. No doubt you've seen the photos today. It was a pleasure to see the guys on the ground and positive feedback from everyone. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Colin. And Councillor Hunter. We're still on
Thank you.
highways, remember.
Thank you. Again, thank you to the staff that have done in Stormhaven. What I'm raising is Cemetery Lane in Tweedmouth. There was works done at the top of Dean Drive a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And now every time it rains, it still floods the properties on there.
Right.
And the residents is not entitled to sandbags from County Council because it's private land, but it's actually from our road that's actually flooding onto their properties. And they can't help the way that it slopes down into their property. So I think if we could investigate whether it's a drainage problem or whether it's something, I think they lowered the curbs, but lowering the curbs encouraged the water to go into their gardens and then go towards their properties.
Yeah, it's a strange one. It seemed to work for a couple of years. I don't know when that was done. It must be 2 or 3 years ago.
It's 2 or 3 years ago.
It seemed to work for a couple of years.
But I did get 1 or 2 calls at Christmas when we had the heavy rain, and there was worried residents that they were going to flood their houses. So
Okay.
if we could look at that again, please.
Certainly.
Thank you. Councillor Swinbank.
Yes, thank you, Chair. With regard to Dennick Lane, which has now been resurfaced, that's a brilliant job. The concern I have, and for members who might not know, this section of road just in by the War Memorial in Alnwick, just a short section, was resurfaced about must be about 2 years ago with I think it was called microsurfacing.
That's right.
It failed quite quickly, and it was redone by the contractor originally, and then it failed again, and now the council's done a proper job. But my question really is, it may be above your kind of decision, but for residents going forward, can you give some reassurance that this kind of microsurfacing won't be done again or used again, because clearly it didn't seem to be a very successful technique at all.
It's actually used quite widely, Martin. That was one of probably 25 microsurfacing schemes just in that year. We've been using it for years now, and it is, I would say, in 95% of cases, it's very successful, and it's a very economic way of getting extra life out of a road. I'm not sure why that didn't work on that site, but it is and will continue to be used.
It was explained, if I could just help Martin there, in the very beginning that it was something to do with putting it down at the right temperature. If you don't get the temperature right, it doesn't adhere correctly. Have we got that right now, do you think?
That's a possible explanation. I don't know when it was laid. If it was laid any time after October, that could well be it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, Martin, it looks as though it's about money, isn't it? It's relatively cheap. Is that what was it?
It's a relatively cheap, and it is a very successful. We've used it extensively over the last few years, and it is successful. That one has highlighted where it doesn't work.
Yeah, well, hopefully, if that is the case, Graham, that lessons have been learned from what happened on Dennick Lane, because clearly for residents in Alnwick that was a bit of a disaster, really.
Yeah, we are still learning about it. We've only started using it 5 years ago, so.
It is right, I'm asked for the chair here, linked onto this, that the most expensive but most successful form of road surfacing is hot rolled asphalt, but it's horribly expensive, and that's why we hardly ever do it. Is that?
It is horribly expensive.
So don't ask for hot rolled asphalt, because you'll not get it, unless it's a very, is there a particular reason, this is interesting, why we would go for such an expensive option? Why would we actually, when and why would we just make such a decision?
Generally, the hot rolled asphalt is used on highly trafficked roads, like E roads.
Right, interesting. Thank you. Right, I think that's it for you, Graham. Thanks very much. I now hand over to Bob, and the floor is yours for local services, Bob. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Once again, following what has been a very long and challenging year of frontline services, our referee crews were out again, working across the entire Christmas period, collecting as usual. Cleansing operatives were also doing their best to ensure that litter bins were emptied, streets were green, clean, and green spaces were areas were remain clean and tidy. In addition to this, our 3 and NEAT teams continue to work hard as we recover from the devastation caused by Storm Arwen, which we've touched on a few times. Priority immediately after the storm was to assist with clearance of road networks. We then moved on to cemeteries and other public areas with high footfall. We will move into the plantations and urban woodlands in due course. We've started to hit those now. Full recovery will take time, and we thank you all for your support and patience during this period. I know there's a few who have said it already, but I would personally like to recognise and praise the huge efforts of our frontline staff and teams over what continues to be a very difficult period. Waste services, as I've said, were out over the Christmas period, but the collections worked well over that period. Very few complaints from residents. Following the movement of some collection days, the COM strategy seemed to have worked well. It's always a risk when you pull days forward that we capture everything that we go out there to collect. On the grounds maintenance, progress on our winter works was initially impacted by Storm Arwen. To a degree it still is, but we're hoping that we can recover from this and complete the programme as planned. We are concentrating on hedges, shrubs and edging of footpaths. Leaf clearance is close to being completed. If there's any areas where we need to retain, please send us an email, let us know. Mechanical sweepers have been out. They've been deployed in areas to help remove additional detritus generated from the storm. Planning for next year's grounds maintenance and grass cutting is underway now, and we'll soon start the process of recruiting seasonal staff for the coming summer period. On the street cleansing side, the guys are working very, very hard. It's pretty much business as usual. They're meeting new challenges every day, but we're getting through them. That's it, Chair.
Thank you. We can start from the Chair by saying thank you. Thank God you've taken over the Alnwick bus station and are cleaning it daily. Is it your side of the house?
It is gone.
Sorry, I didn't get that, Chair.
The Alnwick bus station. Thank you and thank God that you're cleaning the Alnwick bus station. The bane of every councillor's life in Alnwick, I can tell you. And at last, I haven't had a single complaint. Nothing has appeared on social media since you started. Who says the private sector is always better? I'm afraid there are times when it isn't. So you've done a good job. Thank you. Anyway, who's actually? I didn't actually catch it. I'm going to go Councillor Hunter, Councillor Hill, Councillor Seymour. Did you put your hand up as well? No, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the cards that we got ahead of the Christmas collections on the bins. I think County did do a good job as to, sending out the card to the properties that were going to be affected, the change of dates, because I think it did remind everybody that you were doing, and I think that helped your staff as well. Question is, maybe yours, it might have been Graham's, if there's parts of hedges on the edge of sort of the roads, which is just on the periphery of town, that are kind of blown over, part of because of Storm Arwen, this just the way the winds caught them. Is it actually the owner of the hedge, or is it something that if I report into yourself that the staff would go and have a look at to see who should do it, because it's pushing people onto the road because they're unable to use the footpath?
Yeah, we'll do what we can. Like Graham said earlier, a lot of it is privately owned, and they should be challenging, tackling them themselves. But if it's causing a risk, we'll try and get to it. It's a bit of a grey area, but we've got to make every effort to keep any walkways and footpaths, and what we don't want to do is force people onto the road. So we'll do everything we can.
Thank you, Councillor Hill.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch on service level agreements with town councils, and I think it's probably something that the council as a whole, and possibly Councillor Hunter's committee would be one such avenue, need to look at as a whole, and obviously the specific examples. I just wondered what you can tell us about the service level agreement changes with Berwick Town Council, because in their budget tonight, they have 182,000 to take this in-house and employ an operative and 2 local services staff, which means that their precept is going to be 269,000 and the staffing costs are 335,000. So the entire precept plus 66,000 is eaten up by staff costs, which is a concern and from Town Council's point of view, but just from NCC's point of view, what has happened here and what's the breakdown in the agreement and why they are, I presume they've cancelled the SLE and then they're spending 182,000 staff. So I don't know what you can tell from our...
I'm going to hand that over to Greg, if that's all right. Thank you, Councillor Hill.
Yeah, thanks. So Berwick Town Council did join us in a partnership a number of years ago, which has gradually sort of grown and evolved. And there were 2 key elements to that partnership agreement. One was to support the enhancement of various elements of our street cleansing service, so the litter picking in estates in the town centre and some additional public convenience cleansing before we started doing that under COVID measures. And then the second element was around services that the town council are responsible for. So it wasn't enhancing our services, it was undertaking things that they're responsible for in terms of playground inspections and maintaining land. So we've had a number of really constructive discussions with them about how that future relationship looks going forward. But at this point in time, they've decided that they want to take all of those elements that they're responsible for back in-house, and they want to directly employ labour to undertake those activities. So we respect that decision. That was informed. We were informed of that a number of weeks ago by the clerk, and we asked the clerk if any elements of the enhanced cleansing would continue, and I believe the answer to that is no, not at this time. But remain open to then having some further dialogue with us about how we continue to work together to improve the town.
And they're obviously, these guys aren't going to report it to Bob, they're just going to be directly employed by the Town Council. And
yes, yeah, and I'm not sure what the mechanism for collaboration will be, but we have all agreed that, you know, we need to collaborate to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts.
Interesting. Thank you. Thanks for that explanation. I'm sure that's helped Bob a bit. Thank you. Next, Councillor Seymour.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bob, for all the help and clean-up work that you've done through the storm, Arwen, and through to the pandemic, with any staff shortages you may have had, and you've had to deal with all different issues. You've responded to my requests very promptly, so I'm very happy about that. So well done. Thank you.
Catherine.
Thank you. I think we've come to the end of the local services. Thank you very much indeed for coming. Very useful. And I think the next one is the fire service. Do we need a break?
We'll have to have a break to get them in.
Oh, we'll have to have a break. If anybody wants 5 minutes, this shouldn't be too long. We may have 5 minutes, because I actually do. So I'm going to have 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Adjourn for 5 minutes. the Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service Community Risk Management Plan consultation, and we have today with his team Paul Headley. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to briefly bring to your attention the latest draft of the Community Risk Management Plan, which will cover the period from 1st of April 2022 through to the 31st of March 2026. I'm aware you've got copies of the plan were provided in the packs, and there was a very brief covering report, but this is just to try and hopefully put a little bit of more context to that paper.
Thank you. Page 177, if you haven't.
With me today are Deborah Brown, who's our Strategic Policy Risk and Performance Officer, and Simon Daniels, who's on secondment from our Community Safety Department, and both colleagues have been instrumental in the drafting of the main body of this report. I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to run through the whole thing. This won't be a page turner. You'll be pleased to know. This really is just about bringing the plan to your attention, just explaining what it is, where it's come from, inviting any comments, and really just hopefully encouraging participation in the consultation exercise. I know it's a bit of an eye test there, trying to see the slides on there, but essentially what I'm seeing here, Chair, is that the Community Risk Management Plan is a statutory plan. So we have to do it as a duty under the Fire and Rescue Services Act, which creates the Fire and Rescue Service National Framework document. And within that document, there are a number of key priorities which fire and rescue authorities must provide and action. You won't be able to read through the bullets, but suffice to say that on there, bullets 2 and bullets 4 are probably the most pertinent to the development of the Community Risk Management Plan, and they cover off the identification and the assessing the full range of foreseeable fire and rescue service related risks in a service area. And bullet 4 talks about being accountable to the communities for the service which they provide. So this is the Community Risk Management Plan is all about trying to ensure that we are transparent, trying to understand that councillors and residents and communities understand the background and the basis for the development of the plan. So the framework also requires that we have to go out for consultation, which this is obviously part of that 6-week process. So just coming on to the actual plan itself, we previously called the Community Risk Management Plan an Integrated Risk Management Plan. That was the original title, which it had from 2004. It then simply became the Fire and Rescue Service Plan, but we think Community Risk Management actually just explains a little bit more about what it is and what it should be looking to achieve. But regardless of the name, the principles of the plan are entirely the same. So it says that each plan must reflect up-to-date risk analysis. We must demonstrate how prevention, protection and response activities will be best used to prevent and mitigate the identified risks. And what I would say is, although we've got the Community Risk Management Plan at the top of the hierarchy of strategies and policies that we have, sitting below that, we do have individual strategic plans for our prevention activities, for our fire safety and legislative protection activities, as well as our emergency response activity. So it covers off a range of issues which we've got to be cognizant of when we're drawing up the plan. And at the bottom there, it says that it must be easily accessible and publicly available. What I would say on that is we have tried I'm saying the royal we here, Deborah and Simon in particular, have tried very hard to make the language accessible. So we're probably second only to the military in the use of 3-letter acronyms in the Fire and Rescue Service. So we've tried very hard to desist from using them and to try and put plain English in. So hopefully when you've had the opportunity to read it, it will be something which speaks to you as lay individuals and not, you don't have to be a professional firefighter to understand what we're talking about. Just to provide councillors with some reassurance, this absolutely is not a 4-year plan which is cast in stone. This is a plan which is flexible, and it needs to be. It needs to be able to respond to new and emerging risks and unforeseen impacts of risks which we've already identified. So what we do is there is an annual update of the plan every year, which again is made publicly available, and that will talk about the achievements that we've done in that previous 12 months. It will identify our performance. It will look to see how we have responded to the priorities which we've set. It will review our incidents that we've attended, and importantly, it assesses changes to our risk and the risk faced by our communities, and also whether there needs to be any. It will continue to look at whether our service delivery and the models we use to deliver our service are fit for purpose. So if anything requires any further public consultation, that's the opportunity where we would bring it back. So this public consultation is not a once only deal. We will bring matters back for both councillors and communities to pass comment on. It's also not written in isolation. We spend time working with partners to make sure that it's as comprehensive as it possibly can be. And for the last 2 iterations of this plan, we've worked with a company called ORH, who do risk modelling. So when we feed all of the data in, we look at risk models and risk maps, which we think just give us a much greater confidence that we can define and communicate our risks appropriately. And ultimately what the community risk management plan is all about is providing the fire authority, county council and our residents that, as far as reasonably practicable, given that we are the smallest fire and rescue service in mainland United Kingdom, that we do have the right resources in roughly the right places at the right times to respond effectively and efficiently to the risks that we have in Northumberland. A slight departure from previous iterations of the plan is that we've tried to put some commentary within this draft of how we go through the process of understanding and interpreting risk. We've used a fairly standard risk definition, so a combination of the likelihood and consequence of a hazardous event, and in our case, we're taking a hazardous event to be the incidents that we attend. And that definition, which we're using, is also fairly common across the fire and rescue service sector as well, so that there's some confidence that we're applying a similar benchmark to identifying risk as other services do. There's some commentary on the slide which just indicates in the last 10 years, we've been successful in reducing the number of incidents that we've attended by over 20%, and there's been an 11% decrease in the incidents in the last 2 full financial years. Probably unsurprisingly, it's coincided with COVID, obviously, where activity generally has been a lot less. And councillors might just be interested to know that about 93% of all of our mobilisations are to 10 incident types. So they are listed both on this slide but also captured within the report. So I don't intend to run through them. But quite obviously, if that bulk of our activity, that 93% of our activity is focused on 10 incident types, that's generally where we apply our main areas of prevention, protection and emergency response focus to try and get the biggest added value in mitigating those incidents. That's just an example. I talked earlier about some of the work which we do in terms of modelling, and this is just an example of on the right hand side. The map of Northumberland is just an example of the modelling which we do. So the darker the area, the greater the likelihood, based on severity and frequency, of having a dwelling fire. So you'll not be surprised to note that the majority of it is concentrated in the southeast of the county, but it also gives, based on super output areas, it gives the risk rating for all of the areas of Northumberland. The other chart on the left hand side is just an example of some of the performance information that we use, just to make sure that the mitigations that we're identifying and putting into place are working. So within the report itself, I think there's either 13 or 14 examples of different incident types which we attend. And against each of those incident types, what you will see is what we are already doing to reduce the risk, so actions which are currently in place within the service. But against that, or next to that, there should also be actions which we've identified as being further steps we can take to try and reduce the severity, the frequency, and the number of incidents that we're attending down further. So even for, I'll use dwelling fires as the example again. So even on dwelling fires, where we've been very successful over the last 10 years in reducing the number of dwelling fires which we have in Northumberland, we still think that we need to be committed to a continuous improvement journey. And generally speaking, in most cases, there's always more you can do. But as the margins get a little bit finer, obviously it then becomes a professional judgment call on where you get best utility and best value from the application and the allocation of your resources and your people. So within the plan, it should give you an indication of what we're planning to do over the next 2 or 3 years. Also within the plan, we'll have emerging risks. Now the list what we've got in there covers climate change and extreme weather events. It covers pandemic. It covers future housing and commercial development. And it also covers ageing population and increased vulnerability. None of those, I'm sure, will be things which you think are new to the county, and indeed that they're not. We have identified climate change, pandemic, and ageing population in previous iterations of this document. But particularly with climate change, I think what we are seeing is an acceleration of both the frequency and the impact of severe weather events. Obviously, we've just had Storm Arwen in Barra recently, which tested response right across the northeast and the county in particular. Similarly, although we've had a pandemic plan for a number of years, I don't think any of us anticipated the impact that COVID would have, certainly not on the scale where some of the business continuity arrangements relied on drawn-in mutual aid, which wasn't there certainly in the early stages of the pandemic. So those emerging risks are being reviewed and refreshed, and business continuity plans are being updated. There's two specific examples on the bottom there, which are British Wold and also the Ashton Blythe and Tyne rail line. So work on both of those new potential risks is currently ongoing, and we're working very closely with partners in Northumberland County Council on that. I'm not suggesting that it may throw up anything particularly new, so we may not have the judgment at the end of it may be that we've got enough resources to deal with both of those new infrastructure developments. And it may not throw up the need for new equipment or new training, but if it does, again, that would be something which we would bring back for future discussion. So it's just to try and give councillors just some reassurance that we are trying to get upstream of events and identify potential emerging risks as early as possible. Aims and priorities for 2022-23 are included within the plan, so I'm not going to run through them. Suffice to say that the current thinking within the service is that 2022-23, the first year of the plan, certainly the first 9 months of it, will be a bit of a consolidation and review. So we will be looking to review a number of our areas of service delivery. We'll be looking to review operating models before potentially, if the reviews throw up issues which we need to address or proposals we want to make, before bringing them back for future public consultation. There'll also be a focus in that first year of responding to all of the areas of improvement which have been identified in our second HMI report. And for those who've read the first report and compared it to the second report, it is a much more positive reflection of the service. However, having said that, we still require improvement against the three pillars of effectiveness, efficiency and people. So that is going to be a big area of focus for the service in the next 12 months. All of that will be managed through a new performance assurance framework and continuous improvement plan, which has been overseen by the Deputy Chief Fire Officer Graham Binning through the new Strategic Performance Board. And that, Chair, is essentially a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the plan. It was the intention, as I said, was just to try and put a little bit of more additional context to the rationale behind it. The plan has been published on all of our social media sites. We are about to launch a bespoke and dedicated website for the service this week, so that again will be an opportunity where anybody who wants to access the plan through the website will be able to complete the survey and fill in any consultation responses. But we're really just encouraging as much interaction and feedback as possible, because it is very much although it's a complete report, we are very clear that it is still draft. It is still able to be shaped by feedback we get from elected members and our communities. So it is definitely not the final iteration as we see it. So I would just welcome any feedback. This is just to make sure that the plan is as robust and resilient as it possibly can be. Bearing in mind what I've already said, that there will be in-year and annual reviews of it, just to make sure it is contemporaneous and current as well.
Paul, thank you very much for that very clear exposition. And as someone who I used to run security in the RAF, nobody's interested until it goes wrong. And it's the same with this, isn't it? When it goes wrong, my goodness, does everybody want to know why? And that's when you get the money. That's when you get things improved. Can I just mention, before I take any points from the floor, the report is so interesting because the statistics in here are fascinating. The stuff here I don't get anywhere else, and it's really interesting. And occasionally you have to change what you're saying to people because you're wrong. And I remember saying to people, we don't get many house fires. We have far more incidents to attend to that involve vehicle accidents. This is not true. You've got a figure here, 199 house fires attended, but only 128 vehicle collisions attended. That's completely contrary to my understanding before I read it.
What we do get, we get more casualties and fatalities from road traffic collisions than we do from dwelling fires.
I take that point indeed, but in terms of your usage, it's not quite what I had expected, but that's a very interesting.
And I think that, just to take your point there, Chair, I think that's one of the reasons why we're so keen that as many people as possible see this, because the more understanding we build, both at a political and an officer level, but also within our own communities about what we actually do and how we do it, the better for the service. And again, it just means that we can ensure that we're positioning ourselves to be as responsive to the needs of our communities as we can be, given what we have to deliver the service.
Absolutely, thank you. Councillor Mather, you had your hand up, I think. Did you, or did I miss you? I'm doing it, Guy, I apologise. My vision's going wrong. Yes, you're next. Thanks, Guy, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul, for that really good presentation. I was just thinking about the risks part. So in my patch, not in a big way, but in some of it, there's quite a bit of more burning in the summer, and there's been increasing talks of banning the more burning, the environmental and sort of anti-shooting lobby. But if you do that, it then builds up the natural matter to a point where you can get large fires. Does the fire service see that as a risk?
Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service is actually the national lead within the UK Fire Service for wildfires. So within that, that's forest fires and moorland fires. So we're well aware of some of the differences of opinion in terms of whether prescribed burning is a good thing or not. What I would say to you, Councillor, is that we're all about advocating the management of the fuel. So whether that's done through prescribed burning, whether it's done through grazing, whether it's done through swiping or cutting or anything like that, we're trying to just be fairly neutral on that. But the important thing is managing that excess fuel to the point and breaking up that fuel continuity so that a small fire, if it starts on the landscape, doesn't become a really big fire, which very quickly gets out of control, and we're there for a protracted period of time. So wildfires is specifically mentioned within the report, and again that whole climate change, we're starting to see, not just in Northumberland but nationally, we're starting to see greater prevalence of more severe wildfires starting much earlier in the season, where we used to have a nice little window between April and the end of October. That's not the case anymore. We're seeing large fires starting in early January, February, and going right the way through the year. So yes, that is a risk we're actively monitoring.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's on prevention and education. Are you hopefully going to start more your visits into the schools if COVID keeps out of the way? It's just the fact is, you know, I know you're just one of the emergency services, but climate change is coming in, so is more and more getting prevalent than the fire. So, you know, it's things like cigarette and especially the senior schools and disposable barbecues, because sometimes they don't realise what they do, as well as the young drivers, because it's when they get their licence and they don't always realise, you know, going 2 or 3 miles faster around corners and the different driving conditions. You know, so it's more the education.
I think you're quite right, Councillor. COVID has impacted our prevention activity, and we're starting to obviously come out of the end of that and starting to build up the activity again. So we have. I'll bring Deborah in shortly on this one, but we have recently revised our schools education programme. We're still doing driver safety education. And we're looking to try to build on the fire cadet schemes that we've got operating across the county to put more opportunity on for young people to get involved through those mechanisms as well. Because one of the reasons we have been so successful in driving down dwelling fires is in some respect because of the messages in which school children are taking home to their parents and their guardians about just improving the safety of that living environment. So that's been something which has worked very well for us. It's something we want to continue to build on, and we have got plans to try and sort of grow that prevention capacity and delivery. Deborah, is there anything you want to come in on there? I should say before, Deborah, she used to be in charge of the Community Safety Act department, so that's why I'm asking her if she's got anything she wants to add.
Thanks, Paul. I think Paul's covered most of it, but what I would say we're getting a little bit better at is our community risk management plan will inform our local community fire station plans. So not only will we be engaging with young people and going back into schools as quickly as possible, because we really missed that activity, we're actually really thinking more about what we're doing when we go in there and when we are engaging with fire cadets, etc., so that we're addressing the local risk. So, for example, the outdoor fires, the rubbish and bin fires, predominantly the southeast of the county, so it wouldn't necessarily be something that we focused on in some of the more rural areas. We might want to concentrate on some of the other things like the young drivers, etc. So we're getting much better and much stronger It's just looking at what risk is local to you and really important to you as well. So, and ideally to monitor and measure that too. So, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Chair,
Yes,
if I
do
can
come
just add to that, one of the things obviously I mentioned earlier on was this 9 months from April through to the end of the year, where we're going to start some reviews. One of those areas which I would like to review is just how we grow our internal capacity to undertake more prevention work as well. So hopefully that will be successful in just identifying where we can draw additional resources from, just to try and enhance what we're already doing.
Thanks very much indeed. Councillor Swinbank.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, really interesting. Interesting to see you talking about things like British Fault and the Northumberland line, which obviously will pose more risk, and there'll have to be work around that. But I guess those are kind of known sort of sized activities, if you like. But when you're talking about climate change, I was just wondering, because obviously we've seen events very recently like Storm Arwen, which is sort of kind of something most of us would have thought was kind of off the scale. Is when you're looking at climate events, are you just looking at kind of what's happened in the last 5 or 10 years? Are you actually modelling for the predicted what's going to happen in terms of our temperature increases over the planned period? Because the likelihood is that the severity of these events will actually be increasing, not staying static as in 2021.
Thanks for that, Councillor. Yes, we're turning, as I mentioned, as the National Lead for Wildfire, we're plugged into a whole range of university, academic, research, Met Office data, and we have regular wildfire community meetings where we're discussing these impacts. So although the plan is to cover the next 4 years, I think on the issue of climate change, we'll have to look a bit further than that. And there are discussions within Fire and Rescue Service with the team at County Hall who are managing the whole authority's response to climate change, to make sure that we're using the same data and we're plugged into the same methodology and thinking. So I think on extreme weather events, you can't just look at the next 3 or 4 years. You've got to look at what the potential scenarios are going to be at least sort of 10 years down the line, and start modelling your response backwards from that. But again, just to give you some reassurance, we are probably by a comfortable distance the service in the UK who has mapped the most of their wildfire risks. So we've got about 70% of Northumberland where we've actively got work ongoing with local land managers and in the farming community and estates, where we've developed specific response and tactical response plans to cover incidents which happen in those areas. The rest of it, the things like Beast from the East and Storm Arwen, very much on my radar and our agenda. And actually, Storm Arwen, just for your awareness, we had a very busy night on the Friday, but that was the initial sort of impact of it. And whilst we were absolutely involved in supporting the county council's response to all of the restoration over the 10 days or whatever it was following that, it wasn't really something which stretched the Fire and Rescue Service too much, even on the night when the Friday night leading into that Saturday morning. I think the analogy we would give is we're dealing with a lot of high volume but lower severity incidents, similar to a bonfire night. So yes, you know, the short answer is yes, we're looking further afield than just the next few years, and having to rely on just the incident data that we've got, looking backwards 5 years as well.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for coming here today and showing us this community risk management plan. The consultation is closing on the 16th for resident comments. About a couple of days ago, actually, I saw a fire engine on the street in Berwick, and three firemen were going around knocking on doors to check that residents had fire alarms and whether they were working, and it was very comforting to see that, actually, to see that you were checking. I know that you do provide fire alarms for people over 65, I think. But it was quite nice to see you checking, and I was talking to a 90-year-old in her garden, and she's already connected. It was a new build, so she's connected to the mains, so she didn't need you know, any individual ones. But it was good to see that you out and about checking on the residents. So thank you.
No, thank you very much for that, Councillor. We try to target that activity to residents who need it the most, but we will respond to anybody who rings in with an inquiry or a request for us to go and give them advice. And you know, I'm delighted to see all of our advice, whether it's to residents or it's to commercial and industrial premises or businesses, is free, and long may that continue. But yeah, it's a fundamental part of what we do, and as I mentioned to Councillor Hunter, it's something where we're looking to hopefully grow the business as well, so that we can just have more impact on the most vulnerable members of our society.
Good, thank you very much. I'm going to finish with one question. Retained fire staff, are you still having difficulties with recruiting? Is that a silly question? No,
it's not. It's not. So, but it's a very timely question. I think we on call and retained availability is something which is sometimes quite volatile and invariably goes up and down as people leave the service. But we are currently about 30 full-time equivalent posts across the county short on the on-call staffing. Now that obviously has an implication on fire cover and the availability of appliances. But I'm really pleased to say that it's something which we're focusing on very intently at the moment. We've got a recruits course starting on the 7th of February, where we've got 13 trainees starting, and we have committed to run another RDS trainee course in May. So hopefully that gap of about 30 FTEs will be substantially reduced by early summer. One of the things which we do have is we've actually got a waiting list. What it comes down to is our internal capacity to run the courses, because they're obviously very labour intensive for our L&D department. But I think one of the things which is potentially more of an issue than the recruitment is the retention issue of keeping people, because there is a downside to being really successful in driving down the number of incidents that you're attending, and that's maintaining the motivation of people who tie themselves to a PHF for upwards of 100 and odd hours a week, and maintaining that interest and motivation if they're not getting much in the way of mobilisation. And that's where we want to try and expand some of the business into other areas like prevention and protection, to try and keep that level of interest and support going.
Right, I just wonder if you felt there was anything that elected members could do to assist you in that respect.
I think
social media brings to mind.
It does, but I think that's a really good suggestion, Councillor. And what I will do is I'll go back and speak to the Assistant Chief about identifying where we've got our on-call fire stations, identifying the local members, what the establishment's like on those stations. So if there is something which you can promote on local social media pages, we'll be very, very grateful for that support.
Yes, I speak just as happy an admin on a local one of mine, Alec Matters, which and it's non-political, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean. It's that's the kind of thing I think it could promote a lot of interest and leadership. It might be worth promoting a little more. That's
Well, my fire authority chair is Councillor Horncastle, who's based up in Allendale. I've got my deputy fire authority chairs, Councillor Stewart in Prudhoe, both very active. I'm aware Councillor Mather is very active in the Wooler area. So the more activity we can bring to both raising the opportunities within the local community and getting people in, the better.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
That's a good answer. Thank you very much. Excellent. If that's all, and I think it is, I'll thank you very much for a very good presentation, very interesting, fascinating stuff. Let's hope we never need your services.
Well, that's the goal. We must be the only part of the public sector actively trying to put ourselves out of business.
But nobody wants to see. Actually, thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I'll quickly rattle on to say that all we've got is there any other urgent business? And actually there is, but I think I've solved it. The Tweed Commission, we are short of one member, or it can't function. But I think, Councillor Hunter, you indicated that reluctantly or not, you might join them.
I will do that for you, Chair.
Oh.
Thank you.
You see, what more could one ask? Thank you as well. I owe you a favour, that worries me slightly as well, but thank you very much. Thanks guys. The date of the next meeting?
24 Feb.
24 Feb. Thank you very much. Wasn't more comfortable not having hours of planning in front of us. Well, I think I'll do this probably every time.
You sacked me again.
I'm sacking you again.
Are we still here, Gordon? Are we still tied to County Hall?
For the moment, yes. That's a big issue, which is, yes, don't worry about that. I understand why we must get out of this as soon as possible. Given what the government's now saying about Plan B being all but abandoned, I think I could go back on this one and say, hey, well, I agree. If I can possibly do it, we will go Alnwick, Berwick, and then we're supposed to be looking around other parts of the county for the LAC element, today's stuff, not the planning. There's no need to go around with the planning, but there's every reason why we should go around with this, and that's my plan, and that's the thinking. Unfortunately, the report, the LAC review report, that should have gone through council on a Wednesday, since everybody's read it, there's been a few comments made because everybody's seen it, so there's been a few tweaks made, and it'll come back to council in February. That's the present plan, just so you know. Okay? Well, thank you very much, everybody. Good. We're going to leave in daylight. I'm popular again.